Hello, welcome to today's live panel session at the end of day 2 for this iCatConnect event. So happy to have you join us. I hope you've enjoyed today's content. It's been another fantastic day of expertise and fascinating presentations. I hope you found it valuable and useful and given you lots of food for thought. Today's panel session, we've had so many amazing questions come in yesterday and today, and we are joined today by a terrific group of people. We're going to have some very interesting conversations and answers to your questions. So let me introduce the panel. I'm Harry Eckman, head of Global Advisor of Cat Population Management here at International Cat Care. I'm so busy trying to introduce other people, I've forgotten who I am. I'm of course joined in the studio here with Vicky Halls. Doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. She's the head of Unowned Cats here at International Cat Care. Next to Vicky, we've got Nathalie Dowgray, who is the head of ISFM at International Cat Care. And then online, we are joined by Agnes Dufau, who is the co-founder and president of FD Cats. We have Manuela Rowling, who's the head of Stray Animal Care Europe and community engagement for Four Paws International, and Lindsey Narraway, supervisor for animal services at the City of Pickering in Ontario, Canada. Welcome everybody. We have, as I said, some amazing questions, so let's dive in and answer the first one, which is for Vicky. You are the first person to get a question, and this is a really interesting one. I can see there's a significant risk to a cat's welfare if we misidentify an in-betweener cat as a shy pet and place it in a traditional pet home where people may have typical pet cat expectations. But what are the risks if we misidentify a pet cat as an in-betweener and place it in, say, a farm environment?
Good question. And I'm so pleased, Harry, that people are really embracing the concept of the in-betweener. I think this is a very misunderstood group of cats, and now we're starting to recognise them. Obviously, people are worrying that we're going to do the right thing by them. And this is one of the things I hear a lot. What happens if we get it wrong? And actually, this is just a pet cat that's struggling in a shelter environment. You know, we haven't interpreted the intake information we've received properly, and actually we think this cat will definitely be suitable for, in this case, I think the question was a farm home. So put them out to a farm, and you know, we're doing this terrible thing to a pet cat. But in actual fact, we can only rely on our own experience and our knowledge and how the cat presents and what information we have. Now, in this case, the worst case scenario would be this is a pet cat who was just terrified about the shelter, ends up in a farm, thinks, oh, this is all very nice, you know, very lovely, all this fresh air, but actually I'm going to hone into that farm over there, knock on the door and see if I can go and live there where all the lovely people are. In which case, that's not actually the end of the world, because potentially the farmer then phones up and says, that in-betweener I had, actually, he wants to come and live with me. And you've got two options there. Either the farmer says, can I keep him? Can I keep him? Because actually he's rather lovely and he can do, you know, a bit of rodent control and, you know, sit in front of our fire. Or we really did want a cat outside. So you can then say, okay, and then that cat will come back in or will go to foster, and you know you've got a pet cat that just struggled potentially in the shelter environment. However, the big caveat there is, when you give in-betweeners choice and control over how they interact with people, sometimes you see that friendly behaviour towards people. So be aware that some in-betweeners, the relationship with the farmer will be context specific because they feel they've got choice and control.
It's so important, and obviously we have to also allow for the fact that when we have a shelter environment, it's really important to have that relationship with the people that we're homing the cats towards, so that they feel comfortable having that dialogue with us and being able to assess the cat in a different environment and be able to adapt.
Yeah, you need that follow-up, you need that continued support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vicky. The next question we have is for Lindsey. So, Lindsey, this is another great question. Now that I know about cat-friendly homing, and it was a terrific presentation today that you gave, I want to bring it into my organisation as soon as possible, but I'm concerned that decision makers won't be interested. So what would you recommend?
I'd say don't be concerned, don't be worried. Whoever your decision makers are, they're there for cats. They're going to want to help them. But I'm sure everybody has been over the last couple days, they've written down all these ideas, and you probably have pages and pages. But what you need to do is don't try to implement everything at once. What you need to do is take that time. So my first recommendation, and I could have a ton, but is to literally sit down and start to make a list and prioritize based on your individual organizations. Because what I might be doing for me in Pickering, another organization might have different priorities. So sit down and actually make that list and start to think about what you want to implement first. And if you start to look at your list, I think what you're going to see, which relates back to the cat-friendly homing and all the principles, is a lot of these changes that you're trying to do at your shelter are going to be really small. They're going to be obtainable. And for your decision makers, they don't cost a ton of money. So when you're looking at the top and you're trying to make change, a lot of times they're thinking it's going to cost money, it's going to take time, no one's going to want it. But really just, I think, take it and breaking it down to those very small components and starting small is your first step. And then also, if they're not familiar, take them to the website, share all the information, because I'm sure once they start to understand what it is, they're going to want to continue to help the animals.
Thanks, Lindsey. That's such a great answer, and it's so important because so many of the concepts that we talk about because these are big issues, whether it's sheltering or cat population management, they're quite overwhelming in their size, and so breaking it down into these small manageable chunks makes it so much easier. Thank you so much, that's a great answer. The next question is for Nat. We've got multiple occupancy enclosures for our cats in our care, and I don't see any chance of that changing in the foreseeable future. What measures can we take to reduce the risk of disease outbreak?
It's a really good question, and I think it highlights what we would do in an ideal world if we were setting up a shelter versus dealing with the reality of what we've got in front of us. I've never been involved in a shelter that has unlimited funds, and you're often making the best of the circumstances and the facilities that you're working with. And so the reality is, for many shelters out there, multiple occupancy pens are what you've got, and you need to do the best by that. I think we need to be really thinking about who we're putting in those pens and what groups of cats that we are going to be mixing when we're putting them into that sort of occupancy. So a lot of this is very individual to the shelters that you're working in and your intake, where you're taking cats in from. If we can be thinking about what cats are coming in together, cats that may have already, in the circumstances that they were previously living in, be that a multi-cat household, be it the same sort of communal area, maybe within a farm or a more extensive type environment, and maybe keeping those cats together because they've already shared their infectious diseases amongst each other. So we want to try and avoid mixing different groups of cats as much as possible. If that is something that we're not able to do, if the intake of our shelter is very individual cat-based or only 1 or 2 cats and we need to be putting them in enclosures when they're with 10, 15 other cats, we need to be thinking about that disease risk and which cats are more vulnerable. So if there's a way of ensuring that we're able to health check all of the cats by a veterinarian who's aware of many of the infectious disease issues that you see in your shelter population, that's really important, because a lot of the time in private practice as vets, we're not necessarily seeing those types of diseases and are maybe as aware of the signs as we need to be. So we need to be looking at them first, making sure they're healthy before we're putting them in with other cats. And ideally, we need to be vaccinating them. If we could give them 2 vaccines 2 to 4 weeks apart before we're mixing them, that would be amazing. But even if we're able to get 1 into them and waiting a week or so to make sure that that vaccine's had an effect, that's going to help. When we're dealing with those kind of communal shelter situations, if we do have the ability to have some area for a sort of intake quarantine type step before we're mixing cats, that's definitely going to help as well. So it's a combination of thinking about the cats that you're mixing together and trying not to mix different disease groups, and thinking about how healthy they are, getting them vaccinated. The other thing to think about is the age of the cats as well. So if you've got older cats, they've already got a good, hopefully relatively robust immune system. They're in probably a better situation after having had a vaccine than, say, our young kittens. We don't want to be mixing them. Their immune system is still developing. Their ability to respond to vaccines will vary because of maternally derived antibodies. If we can keep them separate or keep them within their sort of familial groups, that's going to help as well. But sometimes there's not a perfect answer. It's doing a whole pile of risk assessments and working out what is the least risky, unfortunately.
That makes so much sense, and it's so practical. As you said, there's so many different ways. Every shelter is going to be a little bit different. You have to be able to tailor what you can do to it, and so just having these different tools and working out what's going to be the most effective is really, as long as you know what the different options are, then you can just try to work out what you need to do. That's great. Thank you, Nat. Agnes, the next question is for you. Oh, this is a good one. Any tips on how to improve the relationship between rescue groups and conservationists?
Yeah, well, that's an important question. I think the first thing is we need to create this communication and this bridge between rescue or cat lovers and conservationists, because it doesn't really exist. So this is something we need to build from now. And then once we got this objective in mind, we need to choose the best person within each organization to to talk or try to talk and discuss with the conservationists. So we need to think about a person with a real capability and willing to discuss and to exchange on cat management, and people willing to be discussing with other people who do not share our point of view. So we know that cat welfare is really not on the agenda of conservationists. And I would say that the third thing is, let's talk with them about cat population management. Let's talk about not individuals, never, because they are not interested and it's not the point. Let's say that we are sharing the same objective, which is controlling the feline population, and we need to work together. So that would be the best person talking about cat population and not individuals, and have this objective of we must, and we will work together, because we are many, many people working for cats. If we could join the work of conservationists and cat lovers in this common objective of control and reduce the feline population, well, that would be really, I think, a win-win. Will be a win-win-win for conservationists, for cats, and for us.
Yeah, it's such an important point, and conservationists. There's often polarizing views between people that are interested in cat welfare and conservation, but also other stakeholders as well have different viewpoints. And you saying there, we don't have to all care about the same thing in the same way. We're not going to be able to convince some people to care about cats the same way that we do, but as long as the goal is the same, we're all trying to strive towards that. That's the key thing, and it's having that conversation and that communication. So important. Thank you very much, Agnes. Manuela, the next question is for you. Also, another great question, so many. If people just want cats removed off the streets, which in many cases isn't practical or good for welfare, how do we approach the conversation about the benefits of TNR and the drawbacks of removal?
Very good question. So when we're speaking with the general public, often the perception that we encounter is that somehow, somewhere, there is a magic wand and a magic land. And we can just wave this magic wand, and all the cats in the streets can be safely rehomed to wonderful families. And this is absolutely not the case, but generally, these stakeholders are not aware of this. So firstly, I think what can come in here is really data and evidence. And we can show this immense gap between cats available on the streets and available homes and facilities that they can actually pass through. And once this gap is clear, another question that it might then be time to ask is to kind of ask the question the other way around and say, are you aware that removing all the cats from the street would mean killing a large number of healthy animals without seeing any effects in the long run, so without actually reducing numbers on the street? And when it's put this way, what we are experiencing is a very strong consensus in the population, in the general discussion, that this is not acceptable these days. Maybe this is the way it was dealt with 200 years ago, but these days, this is not how we want to humanely and sustainably reduce populations.
Yeah. Thank you, Manuela. It's such a, it's a conversation and a discussion and a point that comes up over and over again about, the practicality of it. But, your point about this is just not what people want. They want a solution that works, but also one that's humane. And that's what this is all about. Thank you so much, Manuela. What do we have next? Next is for you, Vicky. Back to you. How does one get over the problem of not having enough time to learn how to become a cat-friendly homing centre? Do you have a link to the course that Lindsey discussed?
Okay, first part of that question, we absolutely acknowledge how busy people are. And we bang on about you've got to learn, you've got to, develop. As Lindsey did at Pickering, she did a coaching course. I was fortunate enough to be her coach, and it was an absolute privilege to work with her, and she did great things. But the sacrifice was to try and find the time to do that work. We know how difficult it is. And with that in mind, we have produced something as part of a learning pathway that sits before the coaching program that Lindsey did, which is the Cat Friendly Homing Foundations course, which is an online course of like micro learnings, basically, where you can learn a lesson at a time, self-paced in your own time, and it takes you through the principles of cat-friendly homing. There's lots of resources attached to it that you can use in your own centre or in your own foster network or whatever. And I think it's about 12 hours learning in total, but it really embeds those basic fundamental principles ready for you to take it forward to the stage that Lindsey went to. Is right, I know what cat-friendly homing is about. What goals am I going to set for my own shelter? So the foundations course will be available very soon. I say watch this space, very soon. And next year, the coaching program is going to be released again for people once they've done that foundations course. And we're hoping this will be achievable, and this will be something they can incorporate within their busy day. And I would say I think it's worth it, and I think Lindsey probably would say it was worth it.
Amazing, yeah. So I'm presuming, this is a good opportunity to ask everybody, sign up to the newsletter so that you can get notified when this does become available. Nice plug there.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So the next question is actually to you, Lindsey. Another great one. Change is hard. How do you get buy-in from your staff to do things differently?
Yes, that is a really good question. And change is hard. And when we're working with the field as well, we have so many different people. We have so many different dynamics. And that also makes it really difficult. But what I did and what I really encourage people to do is to make sure that you start including your staff right from the very beginning. So when I first heard about the program, I signed up. But as we continued and we had our weekly sessions, and as we did, my staff were with me learning at the exact same time, at the exact same space. So that for us was huge. We also had, because I had staff, some of them were really old. I shouldn't say really old, but they were older. They've been in the field longer. And then we also had some that are just out of school. And so there was different learning that they have learned over the course of the years. So we actually ended up doing an experiment so that my staff, as well as myself, could learn and see. And what our experiment was, and I can't remember if I talked about it fully in the presentation, was we really felt that giving a hiding spot was going to be useless, and that wasn't going to help us get animals adopted. And so by my staff, as well as myself, being able to actually see, let's give them a hiding box. Let's see what happens. Let's take one away. What happens? Is it changing the impact? And so for us, learning it together as a team, it really was huge to open our eyes to really start to see that, okay, yes, what we did think was wrong. And that's okay to be wrong, because we're all human beings, but we're learning, we're growing. And from that one little win, I was really able to effectively make so much more change as well. But it was just realizing that we grow over time. And what we've learned in school at one point has evolved, has changed, and we need to make sure that us as human beings, that we continue to learn. So by us learning together as a group, and me not just taking it as the manager and telling them and delegating ideas and tasks, that's also key. People love to be included. They want to be included right from the beginning of that kind of decision-making process. So I felt that was really key. And then also listening to the staff as well, listening to what their ideas might be, because their ideas are going to be different than what I might thinking, and then trying to come up with something that's going to work great for us, specifically in Pickering. So I know Vicky talked about taking that foundation course. So that's one thing. I think if you're looking to implement it, I would sign up as that foundation course and do it together as a team. I really think being together and learning together is going to help you effectively make that change.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Lindsey. It's you know, you talked about it, and you know, it links to the talk I was giving about human behavior change, and it really is just coming down to involving people. You know, you can do it in a top-down way and tell people what you want them to do, but the only way to really get people engaged and involved is for them to be part of it and be as inclusive as possible. And you know, you can see the results of that from what you actually did. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Lindsey. Next question. Next question is for you, Nat, and it's a 4-part question. So we're gonna be here for a while.
Okay.
Okay. So it's all about prepubertal neutering. Mm-hmm. And we probably need a whole webinar just on this. But so there's 4 parts to this question. I'll ask you, I guess, one at a time. Okay. So the first part is the shelter and vets I work with are not willing to neuter under 6 months.
Okay.
Could you explain the benefits for early neutering, not only with decreasing population, but also the health of the cat? And also on this topic, in Spain, the vets won't neuter until 4 months has passed. So what do we do?
Okay. So that one's a really interesting one, and we have to think about cats in general, but also the populations of cats that we're talking about. So the circumstances of, say, a pet cat or kitten in a home environment where maybe they're being controlled, they're not being let outside, the risk of an accidental pregnancy probably quite low, although we all know they're very good at getting out of windows, compared to, say, more the TNR street cat situation, or that population of cats that's moving through a shelter. We're probably going to have different requirements and different needs for all of them, but I think we can say fundamentally, if we can get them neutered before they hit puberty and are at risk of getting pregnant regardless of those circumstances, we can be happy they're not going to contribute further to overpopulation issues. So the way we may go about that might be slightly different depending on the pressures within that particular population of cats, but if we can get them done before 4 months, that's going to be the fundamental sort of factor for stopping accidental pregnancies from occurring. If the shelter sort of process that you're working through is predominantly a sort of owned cat rehoming type organisation, 4 months is probably a good time point for that. In terms of the shelter, if you're not neutering them before you rehome them, there's a follow-up responsibility for you to be chasing them up, making sure that the adopter has gone ahead with that neutering. That's actually quite time-consuming. That's a lot of extra phone calls. People aren't always answering their phones immediately. It puts a lot of extra work and resource on the team. So if they're neutered before they leave, you don't have to worry about that. So from that side of it, it's a lot easier. When we're thinking about that unowned population of cats, when we've caught them in a trap, are we going to be able to do that again? Harry, you've trapped a lot of cats over the years. Do you feel confident that you'd be able to trap the same cat 2 or 3 times over 3 or 4 months?
Even if you could, would you want to put it through that stress?
Precisely. Yeah. There's the being able to do it, but also that's not necessarily the right thing from an overall welfare perspective either. So with TNR, when you've got them, you've just got to neuter them, because chances are you won't capture them again. If it's a female cat, that risk of more kittens, it's gone. So all of that is very different from the average pet cat. But I think within a profession for us as vets, we need to be thinking about those underlying fundamental things. And we're now in a situation where we've got a growing body of evidence, we've got agreement from things like the WASAVA Reproduction Committee that actually 4-month neutering for the vast majority of cats is the fully appropriate option to do it. So I do feel like as a profession we've got a good consensus now that 4 months is fine for all of those circumstances. So let's do it.
Yeah. And following on from that, obviously, so as I said, this is a 4-part question. So adjacent to that, can you tell us about the evidence supporting the neutering of kittens from 6 to 8 weeks? So obviously half of the age we were just talking about there on 4 months. Is this safe with no long-term negative consequences?
So my personal experience, I would say yes, it is safe. I have neutered a lot of kittens between sort of 8 to 12 weeks, again in the shelter environment. it's that opportunity during kitten season to get them neutered, get them rehomed without us having to do that chase and follow-up bit. If we're talking about a dedicated TNR program, again, when we've got them, will we be able to get them again a month or 2 months later when they're a bit older? In terms of our anaesthetic safety and concerns, this is something that we do have to be thinking about on an international level, and actually what drugs are available to be able to use, because they are a little bit smaller, the risk of hyperglycemia is going to be a little bit higher, and we have to use a different, very balanced multimodal approach often with our anaesthetic protocols. And this is something that probably really needs to be closely discussed with the group that's doing the neutering, understanding what drugs are available and also what facilities are available. So it may not be 100% appropriate for every type of TNR campaign, but that needs to be discussed and agreed at the onset, because if we're not, then we probably don't want to be trapping these kittens. We need to have a backup plan to be coming back in a couple of months to mop those ones up. So we need to be thinking about all of that ahead of time. In terms of our evidence, we have a growing body of evidence looking at age of neutering. With many things in the veterinary world, when we're looking for an evidence base, it's not perfect. Countries like the US, Australasia, we have been early neutering for quite some time, and as of yet we don't have a great body of evidence to say there are really negative outcomes with it. We've got some evidence around the risk of obesity, but where we're sitting with that, actually the risk of obesity, I was going to say is just neutering, but actually there's been a very recent paper come out using a non-surgical technique for sterilisation, and it also showed a risk of obesity. So essentially it's interfering with the hormones as the risk rather than the actual surgical procedure. That's less of a concern with our unowned cat population than our pet cat population. So at this stage, based on what we know, we need to make appropriate decisions with the population of cats that we're dealing with, but if we have the surgical skill, the facilities and the drugs available, crack on.
Yeah, and you mentioned the US there, and so this third part of the question, being a veterinarian in the US who's been neutering cats at 3 pounds or larger, I'm not sure what that is in kilos.
About 1.5 kilos.
1.5 kilos, for nearly 20 years. What are the pushbacks people are experiencing with veterinarians who say, can we wait until it's 6 months old?
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, because I come from I'm a New Zealand trained vet originally, and I've been in the field for 20 years, and as a student I was seeing kittens being neutered, so we've been doing it in New Zealand for a similar length of time to what they have in the States. We are in a very privileged position in our countries in terms of the westernisation of our medicine and the availability of the drug combinations that we have. So internationally, definitely one of the pushbacks I hear is about that concern for anaesthetic safety, and they don't necessarily have a great diverse range of safe anaesthetic options to be able to perform the procedure. So for some cases that probably is a valid concern. For a lot though, it is just tradition. So we do have a very ingrained tradition of 6 months neutering. I don't know who made that up, but it has been very ingrained for a very long period of time. It's what people were taught, it's what is being taught in many vet schools, and that just gets ingrained in that this is the social norm. And in the UK, there's been a lot of work from a multiple group of charities, including International Cat Care over the years, to try and shift that social norm. We are getting there, but it's still taking a while. So that's the human behaviour change piece, I think, unfortunately comes into that. But it is usually around concerns about anaesthetic safety and some of these other concerns about the longer term risks, where we've got a growing body of evidence to say it's safe, but we can always do with more.
And the last part of this question, I mean, I say it's the last part of this question, but really it was 4 questions, wasn't it? Yeah. Who are we kidding here? What are the benefits of doing a single vaccine at the time of TNR? Because again, like we were saying, it might be the only opportunity that you get to do this.
Yeah. And so when we're talking about that unowned population of cats, we need to be thinking about what we're vaccinating for. And so if you're in a rabies endemic country, there is a good body of evidence to show, yep, a single vaccine is going to help. It's going to give them some degree of immune response. And in terms of that bigger population concern, One Health, obviously rabies is a zoonotic disease, and we do see when we've controlled canine populations, it seems like cat populations are the next sort of spillover that starts to occur. So definitely for rabies vaccination, it's going to help control a zoonotic disease. We do have to consider, if we're including that within our TNR program, have we got suitable cold chain facilities to actually be able to keep the vaccines preserved, ready to use? So you do need that. The other thing that probably is beneficial for these cats in terms of vaccinations and a single vaccine is the panleukopenia parvovirus vaccine. This is a fatal disease. It's a very hardy virus in the environment. So if you've got a cat sick with it and pooping it out, that whole population of cats is going to be at risk of succumbing to it, and it causes death, especially in kittens. It causes very sudden death. And so again, a single vaccine of that in a cat that immunoconverts to it will be protective as well. I wouldn't necessarily waste my money on vaccinating against the flu viruses. They're not 100% effective in the first place, but rabies and panleukopenia or parvovirus, it's worth investing if you've got your cold chain facilities.
That's great. Thank you, Nat. I'm aware that we actually had a half an hour put aside for this Q&A, and we're already at a half an hour, but unless anybody has an objection, we've got a bunch more questions. So are we all happy to carry on and ask a few more? Got nods all round? Yeah. That sounds good. All right, well, let's crack on. So the next one is for Agnes. So many good questions. Do you have any effective strategies for convincing governments that TNR is an important part of cat population management? Because we know that while animal welfare is important for us, kind of links to what we were talking about before, it's not a priority for many other stakeholders.
Yeah, well, I think it's for the administration and the local governments, municipalities. The key thing is to say that TNR is part of controlling the cat population, and it's a big part of that in certain countries, like in the south of Europe. I mean, we've got cats everywhere in Spain, Italy, and Greece, etc. And that it's a solution to control the cat population, and we have got the solution. So we need to talk to the administration with this speech of, I've got this solution, I know it works, I know how to do it correctly, because that's a big issue, but that should be another webinar. But I know how to do it correctly to get results and real results. And so I will talk to the administration with a proposal, a solution, and not a problem, because usually we often go to the administration or the local government with a problem. So if you go with the problem, obviously the problem, if you've got data on the problem, that's perfect, because if you know numbers more or less, and then you go with a solution, the administration will listen to you. And then the animal welfare is not a priority, but if you say that TNR is also going to have a huge effect on a better coexistence between people and cats, because having a discontrolled cat colony on your doorstep is really not very nice. I mean, neither for me. I mean, it's not nice. So I think what we've seen in Spain, in big cities like Barcelona, is the number of complaints were dropping when the TNR program was progressing. And that was the key. The KPI for the town hall, the city council, was the number of complaints. The number of complaints was going down, and that was, for me, the best, the most powerful information for them, knowing that we were doing a good job to control the feline population. And the result was that people were not complaining anymore, or less complaining about well, you know, all the problems cat population can generate. And the last thing is, I've got a solution, and from now you are going to spend money, you are going to invert money and not throw the money with no result at all, that Manuela said before, because we all know that a lot of money has been spent and not inverted, spent with no results everywhere. Because if we are today, 14th of November 2024, talking about the feline overpopulation and all that, is that because the traditional methodology hasn't worked. So we go with a solution, we go with knowledge, we know methodology, we know how to do it. and you are going to do an investment, long-term investment, and people, last but not least, people, as we said before, they don't want to see animals suffering. I mean, there are publications, very interesting publications, saying that people in our countries of the South saying that, no, I'm not okay seeing cats dying in the street because they are not fed or they are ill. I don't want to see that anymore, and that's very important.
Yeah. There's so many important points you picked up on there. I mean, two in particular that struck me, you know, the responsibility thing. Often when groups or individuals or you know, when we talk about this cat issue, we look to the government or the municipality and say, here's a problem, it is up to you to solve it. And obviously that's not, you know, they have many other priorities. And so coming up with a solution is such an important thing to do. And your point about a whole other conversation about effective TNR and being able to prove the concept and show how effective it can be. We touched on that a little bit yesterday in the discussion session as well. And again, such an important point. It's our responsibility as animal welfare organisations to show that this is effective. You know, it picks up on so many points that we've all talked about today. Thank you, Agnes.
I wanted to add something, Harry, if you
please. Yes.
We did not talk about the best practices for feeding cats, but for me, TNR is not only the trap neutral release, it's the management of the colonies. Yeah. And when we are talking about nuisance for the people, the best practice in terms of how to manage the colony, cleaning the area, best practices for feeding cats properly is a key point, because results are seen in a week if you do a good training with all your volunteers, and that's very important.
Absolutely right. Again, something that's come up a few times, and it's such a key point. TNR is a tool in cat population management. It isn't the single solution, so you have to factor in everything we've talked about: responsible ownership, shelter management, feeding, colony care. All of these things are components of this. It's such an important point. Yeah. Thank you, Agnes. The next question is for Manuela. In your experience, which stakeholder has proved the most difficult to engage with? I'm asking because we are currently struggling to get engagement in the community to embrace a TNR program.
Mm-hmm. So that might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but in my experience, one of the groups that is actually really challenging to engage, at least initially, but extremely important for the success of a project, is a group that Agnes just mentioned, and these are the cat feeders. Maybe the people, often the ladies, that potentially care the most about the cats in the street. But let me explain a little bit, I think, where this comes from. Often when we start a conversation with the people living in the communities and taking care of the cats, they have done this work for many, many years, often decades, without any type of support. All of a sudden, there is a strange organization coming into the area telling them, we will take the cats and we will bring them back and everything will get better. But they very often have made the experience already before that maybe came in, took cats away, did not bring them back. They have made the experience that people promised long-term support that then was not delivered. And we also know, and we have mentioned this many times, that this is a very emotional topic. So these people are very, very emotionally attached to the cats and often marginalized to the boundaries of society for their work. You know, we jokingly say, oh, the crazy cat ladies doing their work again here on the streets. This is hurtful, and this is not helping to build a trusting relationship. And on the other hand, we know that cats have this fabulous ability to reproduce. So what we see in the field is that these feeders sometimes actively sabotage the project by maybe hiding their favorite cats, by opening cat traps, by feeding the cats just before the traps being put out, so that it's impossible to trap them. And really, all I want to say here, we need to build the trust, and we need to work with this group of people. Very often, this takes a lot of resources. Very often, we see that this is all the people that are not linked to other volunteers, that don't use our general digital tools to communicate. Sometimes they might not even use WhatsApp. So yes, it takes quite a lot of resources to reach these people. And sometimes it can be really beneficial then to actually create also networks between them. We have experienced many, many times that there is the volunteer that feeds the same cats on street corner X at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then there is a different lady coming at 9 o'clock feeding the cats again, maybe 10 meters down the road. And once this becomes a bit more transparent and people connect and actually realize that working together is useful, and that coordinating is helpful, and that in the long run we are all wanting the same thing, which is a better life for the cats around us and a better life in the communities, then we can get them on board, and then generally they support the efforts as well. But it takes work, and it takes trust building.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of almost links to Lindsey's answer before. It's about engaging and involving them, because like you said, they're ostracized, they're on the outskirts of society sometimes, they have these emotional connections to cats, but they potentially are one of the greatest assets that we have. They can be champions for the cats, they can really help and be involved in what we're trying to achieve here. So yeah, it takes work, but we need to find ways of bringing them on. Thank you, Manuela. Such an important point again. Vicky, back to you. What might be an easy way to approach old-fashioned thinking in socializing cats? For example, stop forced socialization attempts in a shelter.
Ooh, that's a big one, isn't it? That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I think, and again, I think something Lindsey said earlier really resonates. You go with the knowledge you have, and as you gain new knowledge, you evolve. And I think that there's a couple of things here that immediately spring to mind. First is a core belief that still exists in this sector, which is the only happy cat is a pet cat. So when you see a cat coming into your shelter, traditionally that appears quite fearful, and I think the term people often use is shy, then what you do is you then do something to and with that cat, which is referred to as socialization, and then at the end of it, the cat suddenly thinks, oh, actually, you're really nice, aren't you? So it's all fine. What we do know now with the way knowledge has advanced is the fact that to truly socialize a cat, to help it to obtain a temperament that remains throughout its life, you have to do it during that sensitive period of development at a very, very young age. So the idea that we can, if the cat's very fearful of us and we try and socialize it, if that's the temperament trait that cat has, then we're not going to change the temperament, and we risk all sorts of psychological damage to be such a threat that the cat can't escape from because the cat is so fearful. So I think for me, the most important thing, the really key message of this event is all about that lifestyle spectrum. Not all cats will make happy pets, should be forced to be happy pets. We know that there are some cats that are so adapted to their free-roaming, non-pet lifestyle, it's actually a bit of a tragedy to try and push them along that spectrum to be something they're not. So I think what I would say to everyone is really look at that lifestyle spectrum. Let's start getting some consensus across the world that when we talk about feral, we talk about that true feral, that lives in uninhabited areas. When we talk about the cat outside on the street, we understand that that cat could be a street cat, many generations of unsocialized cat. It could be an expat cat, you know, so that we really understand population dynamics and the lifestyle spectrum. And then we try and look at the individual. Bear in mind, this goes right back to the beginning of yesterday. The first cat-friendly principle is respect cats, you know, respect the species and get to know the individual. We make sure that whenever a cat comes into our care, we are, figuratively speaking, saying to that cat, who are you and what do you need? And we give that cat what that cat needs.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's at the core of every one of these conversations and every presentation, it's understanding that cat. And the other principle there is for us as well, evolving for cats. It's a term we've used several times, and so it's, you know, it's not just about the cat, it's about us and our preconceptions and learning and being open to learning new things as well, changing our minds because we've learned something new. It's so important. Lindsey, back to you. Another good question. How have the changes that you've made influenced your data? And we've had data mentioned a few times. Has it increased the number of cats helped or decreased lengths of stay, for example?
Yeah. So this is, for me, it was actually really interesting. A few days ago, I actually went and started to look and compare our statistics from where we were last year to where we are literally today. And I was blown away. I don't tend to look at the stats very much. I tend to look at what we're seeing in the shelter, how quick we're moving cats through. But one of the things when I pulled the stats, I was looking at the length of stay. And I was amazed. But when you think of length of stay, we have to think about many things. So for us at our shelter, we have a mandatory stray period. So that's going to affect, at the end of the day, our length of stay. The age that some of our cats are entering, when we get a lot of nursing moms, that little kitten is going to stay a lot later. And then obviously the number of animals that you have sick. So all of those things tie into all of the principles as well, because if we're doing all these things effectively, we're able to move them through our facility that much better. But what I was able to find out and where it blew my mind, I'm not a stats person. So for me, I was like, wow, I feel like these are really good numbers. But our length of stay for kittens from last year to where we are this year has gone down by 33%, which again, I feel is phenomenal. And then with our adult cats, where we were really been emphasizing the alternative placement and thinking about what we're going to do with that adult cat the minute it comes into our shelter, it's gone down by just under 40%. And that was just in 1 year of us looking at and making these changes. So I'm blown away by it. And so when I said earlier that these are easy little changes that you can do that are going to have an impact on the lives of these cats, it's true. It really does. And yeah, so that question I think was fabulous. And I was super excited that I was able to share what I just found out with us. And I actually look forward to using these length of stay numbers when I'm going back and I'm talking we report to our council. So when I'm talking about why we need more changes in certain things, these statistics really help and show that we're making an impact in our community and helping the residents and the cats and just really strengthening what it is that we're doing. So yes, definitely the changes and the stats have been phenomenal. And yeah, so thank you, Vicky, because really I wouldn't have learned any of these things if I wasn't sitting with you for those weeks and weeks on time and just learning and gaining so much knowledge. So thanks.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Lindsey. It's so great to hear of such a practical impact. And it's, you know, so many organizations, you know, it's really difficult for organizations to consider capturing this data. And, you know, we know that we're very reactive and we're always trying to deal with the issues that we have. And so it's important to be able to take the time because, you know, you've shown the benefit of understanding the statistics and the data that helps move us in the direction to have greater impact. So you've really shown how worthwhile it is. Thank you, Lindsey. Next question is for Agnes. Any tips on how to improve the relationship between rescues and the veterinary profession? Another good question.
Well, first, we have to say that the vets are really a key part of any TNR program or cat management, cat colony management. They are really one of the most important stakeholders with the volunteers and the associations. And we are lucky. I mean, in Spain, we've got this fantastic feline medicine group, Renfe. We've been working with them since the very beginning, since 20 years ago, and they are really interested and they are involved and they want to make things better. So when we were talking today about early neutering, I remember one of the first conferences we organized with Renfe was about early neutering, and that was like 12 or 15 years ago. So we don't have an issue with vets. What we need to do is we need to understand that vets, private clinics are a business. And we need to explain that our business of TNR or cat colony management can make a good business for them too. They need to understand that. Not all of them understand it. So once they understood that it could be a good business, it's okay, it's perfect. And then what we need to do, and that's very complicated because I am not a vet and majority of us, we are not vets, is get them trained, ongoing training, because feline medicine is changing a lot and shelter medicine is changing a lot. Shelter medicine is not a discipline in Spain. I mean, it's not recognized, but we've got vets trained in shelter medicine. So what we are trying to do is trying to say in a nice way, because we can't say, we don't have the legitimacy to say you are not trained, but we know that many vets are not trained on cats to start with. And people knowing about cats don't know usually about TNR or how to deal with a massive TNR organization, for example. So what we are doing is trying to work always with the vets, and when we do events or when we organize cat colony programs like the huge one in Cordoba, in Andalusia, vets are part of this and they need to be part of it. What we can't do is say that the vets are doing their business and we are doing ours. So I think it's a question of collaboration, understanding what your priority is as a businessman, understanding that science is moving fast on the feline medicine, and then everybody doesn't know. I mean, we've got some issues at the moment with some vets not doing a good job in some places in Spain. What we need to do is try to give them the training or try to get the organizations of vets to give them the proper training to say, okay, we can't have the same operation for a home cat and a street cat. So that's a lot of communication, a lot of collaboration. But I must say that in Spain, we are lucky because we've started from a very nice and very efficient collaboration between NGOs and vets, probably because Claire Besant told us to do so like 15 years ago. That's why.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And, you know, it's interesting, the themes that you mentioned there, obviously the earlier questions to you about how do you deal with conservationists, how do you deal with government, now how do you deal with vets? You know, there's a common answer, which is communication and collaboration and not always having to agree on exactly the same things. It's so interesting that there's, you know, it's clear that there's a common theme through all of these. Thank you, Agnes. I'm conscious we're coming up on the hour, so we've got like a couple more questions and then, okay, two more questions. One for Nat, penultimate question for you. We've had an increase in mycoplasma bacteria cases in street cats. Vets say it hasn't happened in a long time. We were wondering if this is a result of climate change. It's hotter than ever before.
Okay, that one's an interesting one. So mycoplasma is an intracellular bacteria, so generally it's spread between cats from close contact, so it doesn't live that long in the environment as such. Warmer weather probably depends on whether we're talking about warm, dry weather or warm, moist weather. So the humidity factor might have a bit of an influence. What I would be interested in knowing is how you're testing for it, because we have got far better testing tools available. I've definitely seen that over my career with mycoplasmas. We're mainly using PCR tests now, which are a lot more sensitive. So it may have always been there, but we're just picking it up a lot better because we're testing more for it with better tests. But also potentially, if we've got some population dynamics changing, we've got more cats in closer contact with each other, which climate change might be impacting a little bit. There might be more food, so we're getting more breeding. And the more we put cats together, the more infectious disease we're going to get, unfortunately. So I can't say for sure, but it is a possible correlation rather than causation, potentially.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, with this and other diseases and conditions, it's one of those things we need to monitor, we need to see, because there are changes in climate, and so we need to understand if that really is having an effect.
Yeah. Definitely.
Final question for Manuela. Not really a stakeholder question, but is there an impact in your experience on free-roaming cat populations from the effect of dog population management?
I would say yes, there definitely is. So, and in two ways, actually. I see positive synergies and opportunities in the sense that several cities, municipalities, regions up to nations have dealt well in the last 2 decades, I would say, with free roaming dogs, and have implemented large-scale CNVR that was effective. And so they have made this experience that trap or catch, neuter, return does work as a method. Now, cats are not little dogs. They are different, they reproduce in a different way, they need different approaches. However, having this experience that sterilization is a tool to humanely and sustainably manage is already a first step. That also means that very often some form of resources, some form of facilities, and especially the veterinary capacity is already in place to deal with a high volume of animals in a high quality setting. And often the trust also in the population that this is actually a good methodology exists already. So I see all these opportunities. However, on the other side, what we are experiencing in the field is that cities and municipalities that actually have very well reduced their dog populations, they have a gap and they don't do anything for cats. They wait and wait and wait while the cat population grows and grows and grows until it becomes a real nuisance. And maybe this is a really important message to give at the end of this session. Don't wait until you have a problem. If you do already effective dog population management, start in parallel to deal also with unwanted cats in your sterilization centers in a humane, in a nuanced way. Don't wait until the population gets out of control and is then much more challenging to reel in, because you're dealing with a huge volume and very, very large numbers. So some opportunities, but definitely also risks.
Yeah, such an important point to end on there. Thank you so much, Manuela. It's, when we do these kinds of programs, it's only through learning that we see the consequences and the cascade of effects of what we do. And the fact that we know that these things can have an effect is so important to be preemptive about it. Like you said, there's an opportunity there to control a problem before it happens rather than waiting. And we've all experienced, those desperate calls from a city council all the way down to a colony manager who says it's gone out of control. And it's not that we're blaming anybody, there's nobody to blame, these are things that happen. But if there's an opportunity to look ahead and plan ahead and be strategic about it, then there's so much that we can do. And we've learned over the last couple of days that there really are so many things that we can do to help. That's wrapping up this Q&A session. Thank you to anybody and everybody who contributed questions. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to. yesterday and today. So what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to be putting all of the unanswered questions together. We're going to, with our panel of experts and panelists, going to be answering those in a document, and then we will go and actually post that document so that you can access it online after this event, and that will be on our Unowned Cat Community Hub. Now, speaking of the Unowned Cat Community Hub, nice little segue there, wasn't it? Did you like what I did there? Obviously, we mentioned this before. Everybody hopefully knows. We've had links to it in the chat today. Please sign up to the Unowned Cat Community Hub. The membership is available for everybody. And by doing so, you become part of this community. We've seen over the last couple of days, there is so much interest and desire to be part of this community. We're all working towards the same goals. There is so much available resource, collaboration and communication between us, and this hub is going to be such a central point to be able to do it. So please sign up to the Community Hub. I mentioned the benefits yesterday. I'll mention them again today. All of the content that we've had over the last couple of days, from these panel sessions, these live sessions that have been recorded as well, all the way to all the presentations and resources and materials are going to be available online from next Monday, from November the 18th. You'll be able to access them, as well as CPD, Continued Professional Development Certification, as well as attendance certificates to everybody that participated in this iCatConnect event. In the coming months, we're going to be able to translate all of this into Spanish, Portuguese, and Greek, so it'll be accessible in different languages as well. You're going to have access to these online courses that we talked about earlier, and on-demand learning, e-newsletters, a bi-monthly e-newsletter, and you'll have access through our online archive of all the previous newsletters as well, with all the information and resources and stories and content, have access to all that. Plus, of course, all of our ongoing educational resources, tools and guidance and infographics, and there's so much available. So you should all have access to the link already, but there's also going to be an email coming to your inbox. Please check your spam folders over the next couple of days, and you'll be able to sign up and become a member and access all of this great stuff. Also in that email, you will be getting a survey questionnaire. Please give us feedback on the last couple of days. We really value your input, and so that when we do the event next year, we're going to be able to take everything into account and make this as valuable as possible for all of you. The very last thing for me to do is a bunch of thank yous. So thank you to the speakers and panelists today, obviously Vicky, Nat, Lindsey, Agnes and Manuela. Thank you to all the presenters today. Thank you very much for the comms and production team here at International Cat Care. Thank you for the production company ProLive, who helped put this all together, Battersea for supporting the event, and most of all, thank all of you out there. 3,000 of you subscribed to this iCatConnect event from more than 107 different countries. You've engaged. Hopefully this has been a great experience for you. We're all in this together. We are all working to improve the welfare of unowned cats around the world. Thank you for being part of this community and joining us, and look forward to seeing you all at the next iCatConnect.